There is a Russian word, Vauxhall, which means railway station. There is a railway station in London called Vauxhall. This has led to a persistent story that the word Vauxhall is derived from the station name, Vauxhall. This is not true. The word is not derived from the station at all. Actually, it's derived from the park next to it. So the story goes thus. A Russian delegation comes to visit London. Among the places they are shown is Vauxhall Station. So impressed are they by this station that when Russia comes to build its own railways, they use the name Vauxhall to refer to major stations. Now there are a few problems with this story. An obvious one is, why Vauxhall? It's a pretty important station these days, but it's hardly the most glamorous station. It's certainly not big enough to justify it becoming synonymous with big termini. But a more important point is that when this delegation visited in 1840, Vauxhall Station did not exist. It would open in 1848 on the same day as Waterloo, the line's terminus. And by that time, the first railway station in Russia was a decade old. So where did this delegation actually go? I think there's a little confusion in the story. Vauxhall and Waterloo were both built by the London and South Western Railway. Before that, the LSWR used a terminus called Nine Elms. Not that one. This one. This was not a very large or fancy station compared to the big termini that would come later on, but it was close as the LSWR could get to central London at the time. It opened on the 21st of May, 1838. Its shortcomings quickly became apparent. It was a long way from central London. On the recommendation of the line's engineer, Robert Stevenson, the LSWR followed this station up with a new terminus at Waterloo Bridge. Even that wasn't really what they wanted, since it wasn't quite in the West End or the city proper, but Stevenson argued that they weren't going to do any better, and he was absolutely right. Vauxhall was basically a replacement for Nine Elms. It was much better located, being closer to the river and Vauxhall Bridge, but it was close enough to the old station that it could serve the same passengers. As for Nine Elms, it no longer served its original purpose, so it was closed to passengers in July 1848. The LSWR kept it as a goods station. Well, mainly as a goods station. It was also used as a terminus for royal trains away from the crowds. So if our delegation visited a station, it was probably Nine Elms. Okay, so what does the park have to do with all this? Well now, that's a complicated story that begins long before any of this. This park is known as Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens. In the 17th century, pleasure gardens began to appear in London. As the city grew, it was harder and harder to get out to the countryside, so some enterprising folk created gardens where people could get away from the dirt and noise of urban living. The New Spring Garden in Vauxhall appeared at some point after the restoration of King Charles II, we don't know exactly when. After the Puritan reign of Oliver Cromwell, Londoners were ready to cut loose, and the New Spring Garden was just the place. Here there were flowers, trees, fountains, and all the glories of nature. There were also musicians and food vendors. The landscaping incorporated a number of winding and hidden paths where a gentleman and a lady might engage in all manner of scandalous behaviour. At this time, Vauxhall wasn't called Vauxhall. The area takes its name from Sir Fawkes de Breault, who had an estate here. His estate was known as Vauxhall, and I'm sure you can see how that would evolve into the present name. It was also known as Foxhall, Folkshall, and several other variants over the years. It was in the 18th century that the gardens would really take off, though. One Jonathan Tyers took the gardens over and renamed them to Vauxhall Gardens in 1728. His vision for the gardens was rather grander than what had gone before. He remodelled them with arches, pavilions, statues, and a temple dedicated to Comus, the god of festivities and nocturnal dalliances. There were lanterns and paintings and even an underground orchestra whose music was piped through the bushes. It became hugely popular in fashionable society. 3 centuries before Instagram and TikTok, it was a place where you could go to show yourself off. Wealthy visitors would arrive by boat in fancy dress and parade around the place. But it wasn't just for the rich. Anyone could experience the wonder, provided they could raise a shilling to get in. By the 19th century, the entertainment on offer had expanded to include acrobats, fireworks, and comic songs. But the world was changing. The arrival of steamers and railways made the seaside and the country accessible even to the relatively poor, and the gardens had trouble keeping up with changing tastes. Their reputation had gone downhill. They were infamous for overpriced food, criminality, and just general naffness. Despite attempts to upgrade and update, they closed for good in 1859. The current park is not the original gardens. The site was built over in the 1860s, and it wasn't until the Second World War that it was cleared and once again the area became an oasis of green. But even as the gardens were in decline, the name of Vauxhall was about to take on a new significance. Pavlovsk, outside St Petersburg, was a popular retreat for the wealthy. When the railway came to Russia, an obvious route for the first public line was between St Petersburg and Pavlovsk. This was the Tsarskoye-Selo Railway, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong. To encourage visitors, an entertainment venue was incorporated into Pavlovsk Station. It was inspired by Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens and in fact rejoiced in the name of Vauxhall Pavilion. The station opened on the 23rd of May 1838, just 2 days after Nine Elms. It was indeed a popular venue, so much so that the name Vauxhall caught on for any large railway station. And why not? It would have been the average Russian's first experience of this new form of transport. So that's how it happened. That's how a park in South London gave the Russian language a new word. I mean, I've got nothing against Vauxhall. I'm just saying, it's not where the name comes from. That's all. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video. If so, please do leave a like and consider subscribing for more. I would like as ever to thank my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your kind support. You are the orchestral music to my bushes. And I'll see you all again very soon. Cheerio.